Hello guys, welcome to my channel. My name is Swadhin and today we'll be continuing our interview question and answer series, and today's topic is asynchronous programming in JavaScript. Let's get started. So let's discuss about what is asynchronous programming and why we need that. Generally, every process runs on thread, and thread is a single process that executes a program sequentially. Means suppose we have three tasks, task 1, task 2 and task 3. It will execute each task, and each task are basically some instruction to our processor, and it will execute task 1 first. After completing that, it will move to task 2 and the task 3. It will sequentially complete this process, and this is having in one thread. And generally we have single threaded application before, but now with the help of multiple cores processor, we can do multi-threading as well. What is multi-threading? Instead of having one thread which is doing everything sequentially, we can create multiple thread, okay, and in that we can do multiple tasks simultaneously, and that is called as multi-threading. We have two thread, and task 1 and task 2 in the first thread we are doing, and task 3 and task 4 you are doing in the second thread. So in JavaScript, let me tell you, JavaScript is a single threaded programming language. It has only one programming thread that is called as main thread, and it all the execution is happened by that main thread. Okay, so that's why we have a blocking mechanism in JavaScript. Means when you add an alert button or when you are doing some UI functionality, it waits for the user's input to continue the next code or next block of code. We have only one thread to do all the logic. JavaScript gain some tools to help with such problems, and we have web workers which allow us to send some JavaScript processing code, and we can do something in a separate thread apart from the UI thread using web workers. Means we can have something like a main thread which will be doing all UI related activity, and a separate worker thread where we can do some additional logics. Okay, but this have their own limitation. What is the limitation? Using worker thread, we can't do any UI operation. It is not able to access the DOM of our elements. So this is our first limitation. The second limitation we have is, since it is a non-blocking, it's a non-blocking, but it is still synchronous a way of doing code. What do you mean by that? Means if it is doing some task, this worker thread is doing some task which is taking 5 minutes to load some data, maybe from a server, maybe from an API, then it will not wait for this data to load, and it will execute the remaining code after that, because still this is a synchronous process, synchronous approach. To solve this issue, we can use asynchronous code to do our job. What do you mean by that? Suppose we have two tasks to do by the main thread. The first task is loading data from API, and that takes around 5 minutes to load those data. The second task we have is, once we got that data from the API, I need to print that to the DOM. So the second task is dependent on this task 1. So if you are doing it in separate process using workers, what will happen? The task 1, it takes 5 minutes to do that, and task 2, it will immediately run that. So at that time there is no data to load, and it will throw an error. To resolve that, we'll be using asynchronous code, and somehow we need to wait for task 1 to complete, then execute this code. And these are some technique which will help us to do that. That is callback, promises, and async and await. Let's quickly move to VS Code to implement those things and understand it in a practical way. I've added an HTML file and a script file to start with. So let's start with first creating some post. And this is our first task where we'll be getting data from API. We are not directly calling to a server. We'll just replicate the same thing using a set timeout method. So for that, I'll just create an array, which is an array of objects, and this will contain name, and that will, I'll just give John, and the second parameter will be email, email, and that will be basically any email. So I'll just give abc@gmail.com. This data is not important to us, and I'll just copy paste the same thing because I would just want one more to show that. So I'll just add one more here, and I'll just give this door, and I'll just give xyz@gmail.com. So we have created one users array which is containing two values. So now let's create a method which will help us to print that into DOM. So I'll just create a function get users, and this users will have inside that I can iterate through each users by using a for each loop. And for each loop basically takes a callback function, so I can use something like function, or I can use the arrow function I can use here like this, and I can pass as this is basically arrow syntax. We are not doing anything fancy here, and I'll just pass it the user as this is. We will also get index and the entire array, but I'm focusing on the user. And here what I want to do is I want to use that output parameter I've created, and I will append something to that, and to append it I'll use plus equal to sign. And what I want to append, the value which is there inside the user, and I will append that in a list tag. So I'll create a list tag like this in a template literal by using backtick, and here I will add another template literal to add our user dot name, okay, which is the property we have, and again I can close the li tag. So I'm just creating a list tag with this output. So it will iterate through each user and create this list tag, and it will add this to output. And the next thing I want to do is I need to append that into the HTML. So for that I'll access the body by using document.body, and there is a property called as inner HTML. I can assign that output to that. It will basically allow all the user we have to add this to here. Okay, we are not, it's not added yet because we are not calling it yet. So I'll just call this get users to add all this thing to our page, and you can see that we have John and Doe which is added here. And as I told you, we need a second task, which is basically, this is the first task we create, means to print something to the UI or the DOM. But the first tag, the second task which is important, to create a user. So I'll just create user by using function keyword, and I'll just name this create user. And inside this I'll take an argument as user which user will pass, and here basically I need to replicate the same thing which I wanted, that we are calling a server, and from the server there is some delay so that we can replicate. We don't have a server now, so we'll just replicate the thing using set time at method, which is a method which will do some logic on the basis of some time duration we are giving. So this takes a callback function, and inside that I can write an arrow function, and this arrow function, inside this what I can do, I can access the users array which is already there, and I can do push, and I'll pass the argument which we have that is called as user, and I can pass this user what we are getting as the argument, and I'll do something like user. And this is basically what we are doing. It means it will take 3 seconds to load this, okay, and but it will add it. See what will happen now. If I call create user, okay, and the create user, I'll pass maybe I will call this create user first, maybe, okay, and I'll just call this create user first, and then I'll pass an object because it takes the object, and I'll just copy paste from here, and I'll just change something there, and the name I will change it to Rocky, and something called as here I will change it to, let's the email let be any random thing. We are passing this third user Rocky to this user object, and it should be shown in the if when I refresh it, you can see that I'm still able to see only John and Doe. I'm not able to see this third thing which I created. Why is that? Because what is happening, this is the problem with the synchronous approach. This second function we have is taking 3 seconds to complete this task. But the first function we have, it is taking 0 second to complete this task. It's just immediately we are executing it. So at the time it is executed, this data is not yet added to this user. So that's why we are not able to see that, and we need to fix that using our asynchronous method. So the first thing we have, as in the slide we saw, the first thing we'll be doing is to fix it using a callback. How to do it? Here, when we are creating a user, okay, instead of having only one method, okay, only one argument, I can have a second parameter as callback. You can give any name you want. I'm just giving callback to understand this is a callback, and I can execute this callback right here after I'm pushing it. So once we have this callback here, and I'll just call this here, and let's change this, let's remove this get user from here because it will give some error now because we don't have this callback defined first thing to this create user. Let's remove this one from here, and as a second parameter will pass the get user method, but without the parenthesis. Means we are not calling it, we are just passing a reference to the function, and here it will call it. When it will call it after it push the user array some new element. Okay, and you can see that when I refresh it, also it would take 3 seconds to load something, so that API server part we are able to replicate, and we can able to see all the users. Like previous we have only two now, but two at that time, but now we have all the users. So basically it is waiting a new user to be added, then it is running this get user method. Okay, so if I add another element, also suppose I'll create another element that will also be working, like I will give some random name here, and you can see that it is still waiting for that, and we should see 4 element. Okay, and now this is called as asynchronous coding using callback. We have two more methods to do the same thing, that is promises and async and await. In the next video we'll discuss about promises and async and await. See you there. Bye bye.